hirurzi koji učestvuju u procesu nastajanja umetničkog rada, hirurzi koji operišu umetnike i umetnice, koji potom izlažu proces transformacije svog tela, hirurzi koji operišu umetnike i umetnice ne bili izgledali mlađi i lepši, kozmetičari koji depiliraju umetnike i umetnice.
Welcome to the exhibition that's part of this year's curation of October Salon, which is, as we started to talk here, made for the local art scene. It is very important to us to emphasize that this October Salon is made for the local art scene, because before the economy of the exhibition was mostly made, maybe the 4 October Salons before this one. The curators were quite alienated from the local scene, no matter that they were showing sometimes a local scene. This was made in an unorganic, not enough communicative way. So it was very important that this year the organizers of the exhibition, which are curators of Cultural Center of Belgrade and Zorana Minati Đaković as the artistic directors, that she decided, or maybe this was a processual decision, that this year October Salon will be made through the process of communication with different, bigger organizations, the associations of artists and critics, and independent cultural and activist initiatives, and other formal and informal organizations that are part of the scene here, and that they wanted, because of precisely of the critique of that this few years ago, several October Salons were organized in an alienated way from the locality, to make one that is very much connected to the locality. And within this concept, they made one like a formal invention or curatorial composition, which is to have as a part of exhibition, and especially here, which is a kind of, and which has been for many years, the central space of October Salon, the Cultural Center of Belgrade, to initiate the idea of presenting one artist from the local scene who has also some international, obviously, career, and to call this chapter of the exhibition Artist in Focus. So this year, Artist in Focus is Milica Tomić, who's a very important conceptual and politically engaged artist, who is working starting 80s, maybe more intensely, starting 90s, on the scene here, and who deals in her entire career, who deals very much with difficult questions, such as the questions of war, the questions of privatization, of factories, institutions, and psyches, of either citizens or cultural communities. So she invited me to co-curate this exhibition, and I said, you know, this very term of curating is maybe sometimes problematic, also because of the entire context in which the curators of the exhibition are already people, the colleagues employed in Cultural Center of Belgrade, and I proposed her a term, discursive companion, whereas the word companion is also borrowed from the theory by Donna Haraway, and as a companion to human, she speaks about the dog or the cyborg. So I am the dog and the cyborg, but in a theoretical sense to this exhibition by Milica Tomić. The exhibition is comprising of basically 4 chapters. And we delineated these chapters, emphasized these chapters with the boards, which are explaining what is the part of the chapter and what the chapter tells about. So this is one chapter of the exhibition, and the kind of chapter which is in the end of the story. But we will go, you know, like in this non-chronological tradition, we will be going through the exhibition and then mount the narrative of the exhibition in our heads, each one for himself or herself. So the title of exhibition is made in English language, and it is this expression, how on earth it is possible that we found ourselves here in this situation, in the permanent war, in the process of privatization, in the moment where 1% is wealthier than 99%, in the moment where we had pandemic and then the war after pandemic, through which pandemic has been forgotten from the media, in the moment where media got privatized and started dealing with this nowness. So with an immediate moment without real political and social responsibility, in which art and culture are very much appropriated by cultural industries and kind of put through the processing of hyper consumption, of instant consumption, and so on. So it seems that nobody has this deep analytic concentration these days, or this naivety which is really needed to imagine the world differently. So how on earth we found ourselves here, you know, like after the experience of 20th century and after, I mean, all the positive historical experiences we had, how on earth? The exhibition does not only express wondering how this is happening to us. Oh my God, so the artist is not putting herself in the position outside. It is not about wondering, it is not about, you know, like being astonished with this moment that we found ourselves in. It is, the exhibition is made as a series of installations, tales, montages of the images or stories or narratives, which are basically showing our, if you will, maybe not directly and in the most percentage hour, but even our participation in this moment in which we are sitting or lying on earth or whatever we are doing now, standing upright but not really super upright, I don't know. So the title is How on Earth, and then on this wall, which the artist is treating as a mural. So for her, I said she's conceptual artist, now we are going into her language. So she's conceptual artist, and he's proclaiming this to be a mural. In the wall, you have under this big title many expressions of translation, possible translations in our languages of the title How on Earth, in which we see the also complexity of this phrase. And we also see how the translation itself is already a production or an interpretation. The structure of the exhibition is made similarly to, okay, this is my interpretation from not the time of making exhibition, but I came to it on the previous guided tour. The exhibition is made according to the structure which Slavoj Žižek sees in Hitchcock's movie Psycho. The structure is that in the middle part there is ego, top part superego, and the dead mother is in the id. Here in this exhibition we have the war in the basement. Then there is discussion about art production and exhibiting, and about property first of all, as an ego, and here like a superego culture, like a cultural situation, contemporary cultural situation today. So, but basically the idea is that you connect it also to the war, the story here with the rest of the stories. This part of exhibition has basically two big topics, entwines two big topics, whereas one is a market and another is institutions. So Milica is presenting the stories about market, which are made as a kind of imagination in the years of transition. So the years after the war, and transition is not. I mean, this is how to explain first. This is how the process of reparation. Okay, very ideologized reparation of the war processes, reconciliation, normalization, and so on are made official term of the political science and like a political management is transition. And transition, though it implies this state of even, you know, flying, like if you will, in the art history we have these images of transition presented through the state of Virgin Mary, who is whose soul is going to clouds. So this is the moment of transition. In this context, it is very politically and ideologically loaded, but also like is very colonial, because the transition exactly assumes this idea that some societies have reached the solid cultural stage, the solid cultural base, and some societies should undergo the process of transition, that is the process of self-disciplining in order to achieve the Western capitalist norms, which means the transformation of, say, social property or state property into private property, the processes of restitution, the processes of marketization, and so on. So these two videos are, and the photograph are about market. The video here first is made after the story of artist, conceptual artist, the member of New Art Practices, Braco Dimitrijević, who in 70s written about this idea how art and success in the art field is a matter of luck and not the matter of strategy and so on. One of the way to mystify art, as the market also mystifies art, and this is one of the theses of this part of exhibition. And he said that there was a king in hunting with his dog, and that that they were entered the wood in which the two artists has their little ateliers, and then the dog was running towards the atelier of one artist, and the king has followed the dog. And the atelier of this artist, the name of the artist whose atelier the dog has entered, has been entered was Leonardo da Vinci. About the name of the other artists, we've never knew about. So this is this idea about how to mystify art, and Milica Tomić is here present for the sake of presentation of the exhibition of young artists in one of these transitional constructions of the exhibitions, like let's present some young Eastern European artists in a bigger Western institution. She's using the dog, Barney, to make the selection. And if one observes, there is a video closely, there is a lot of tiny anecdotes which are posing all these important questions of a participatory art piece, of chance, of success, of like colonizing conditions in the culture of contemporary art, although contemporary art is always presented as international, global, inclusive, and so on. But that in its structure there are colonial conditions, and we also see that it is always this uneasy situation between the artist who does some recording and those who are recorded. In this case, these are also young artists who are saying, no matter whether one of them is saying, no matter whether I agree or disagree, you know, you will anyway use it for your video. And this is this remained in the video. So the artist didn't made censorship or self-censorship in that. She intentionally left it in the video to show also these tiny aspects of complicity with the situation in which we are, and that is shared among contemporary artists. Just quite often it is the case that this is edited and like polished until the point where there are no contradictions. So, but she really wants to open up these contradictions. On the video, which I really highly suggest you to see it from the beginning to the end. It's made in 2005, and there is a group of artists and gallerists and curators and critics who are speaking about market without having in their own practice, okay, they know what's market in theory, but without having in their own practice the experience, the real experience of market. So it is interesting that in this years of transitions, the art scene also differentiated in itself around the idea of market. Some of the artists were really pro-market, like dreaming about market, having this idea, okay, market will come and resolve everything, all our problems, make the distinction between bad and good, successful and not successful, deserving and not deserving, and so on. And there were those who were very, okay, critical and suspicious about market. So we are encountering all these fantasies and contradictions in the relatively long video, which is on the other side. So, and it is all confronted with a very cold photograph by Milica Lopičić that we decided to include in the show as an opposition, as a kind of cold reality that opposes these fantasies about the fantasy of market, and this called reality is the abstraction of the value and financialization that is happening, financialization of the capital and also of the value, including the value of art, that is happening nowadays. So in this series of photographs, Milica Lopičić, another artist who is a guest here, and you will see that through the exhibition there are always some guests which are co-participating. She is presenting the artworks that are having a certain value, but that are in these boxes, asking the question whether art which is enclosed and which is in entire dark whether it is an art, okay. It can be, if it is not public, whether it's art or not. So it is a cold reality that one can easily juxtapose with this like more warm, crazy, ludistic fantasies of people participating in an artistic scene. You can enter this room either from here, which I will do, because this is an installation and is left as a part of installation and exhibiting process. This is exhibition material, boxes and so on. I will tell you what are the elements of this total installation, which is the language of this room and which reminds in many ways on the exhibition setup or the process of toning down the exhibition or putting exhibition on wall. So these are the processes, like the processes that are taking place in museums, galleries, and so on, but which are not often exhibited. It is what precedes exhibition or what's its afterlife. Afterlife of the exhibition, whose fragment you can find here, and it is the fragment of the work by British artist Jim Lambie. And the exhibition was called Breaking Step, Displacement, Compassion and Humor in Recent Art from Britain, made in 2006 and 2007. And after this exhibition, exactly after this exhibition, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Belgrade, which is currently very problematic, I'll tell you why later, entered the process of what seemed to us at the scene as a never-ending process of reconstruction. The reconstruction of the museum is performed, is closed in 10 years after it started, which is really incredible. So several governments passed through and different people in charge, different directors and so on. Until the moment where museum is opened by the current right-wing populist government, who really, by their speech, language, and so on, really appropriated the museum as if they not only reconstructed it, but they built it. And the museum was built as one of the first, maybe, museums in the geopolitical space of Eastern Europe, or Eastern Europe's, why not? It's built in 1967 and actually initiated in 1965. So the moment where Prime Minister was telling at the night of opening museum that now it is built and it has 5 levels, it is rebuilt, refurnished, and so on, and has now 5 levels, that the museum is opened on 5 levels. It's been on 5 levels from the very beginning. It was the first act of appropriation, and now it is, as many other institutions and also like important enterprises of the country, it's topped by a person who is totally non-professional and who is absolutely not competent to lead the institution. And this is like the bigger social problem here, that the people who are on top of institutions in most of the cases, like maybe 70% of cases, are in the in the function of interim director, so the people who can be easily politically manipulated and who do not have competencies. So in example, the entire electricity system in our country is run by, I mean, the enterprise is run by a person who has like zero competencies in CV in that important field. And if this can happen with such a big enterprise giant, then normally it can easily happen with the Museum of Contemporary Art. But this is really unacceptable. So how on earth the person who before became director of Museum of Contemporary Art had only Instagram and Facebook profile? How on earth? So I see this process of 10-year reconstruction of the Museum of Contemporary Art as the process of privatization and as a process of silencing of what was the basic function of the Museum of Contemporary Art, which was a modernist museum for, with a really representative collection dedicated to Yugoslav art. And of course, this determining aspect of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Belgrade, the fact that it has this important collection of Yugoslav art, it proved to be a problem in the process of constructing nation-state, private property, cultural industries, instead of an autonomous art practice, public property, and competence. And socialist self-management, which was also part of the museum, where things were made entirely on the basis of bottom-up decisions. Here, the curators of the museum, so everyone who is employed, basically performs what's the decisions which are made top-down, so which it is total, though it looks like, okay, this art has nothing to do with the politics, it's so colorful. Yeah, it is colorful and maybe not deep enough, but and analytic enough, but it has to do with politics very directly. It is today's colorful art is instrumentalized. So as difference from the 20th century where we have spoken about instrumentalization of art from the side of authoritarian regimes, now we have chance to see how stupidly colorful and consumable and empty the contemporary authoritarianism is. This is this fragment, the remnant of the work by Jim Lambie, which inhabited, I mean, it was more or less this form, tape on floor and so on, but it was visible in the museum for entire 10 years while it was in the process of reconstruction. And in this empty museum in the process of reconstruction, one exhibition, conceptual exhibition, took place. The exhibition, What Has Happened with the Museum of Contemporary Art. And my great colleague and former designer who recently left Museum of Contemporary Art, Andrei Dolinka, was one of the curators of this exhibition. A very interesting exhibition, also the exhibition that deserves today in this chapter of historizing exhibitions, it really deserves to be historicized because as a conceptual show, but also as an exhibition which tells about how the culture is censored in this kind of a very tacit way, in this kind of indirect way, but is heavily censored, and how these processes are taking place. And I think it is not only the local feature, It is like a great local story, yeah, under the quote marks, but it is an international thing. And we know how museums in Poland have been also privatized, occupied, put on different track, and how interesting institutions they were before. So also as a part of the story on institutions, this like large story that if I fall in, I can I have a difficulty to find an exit. As a part of this story, she also exhibited the photos and the end conceptual product of the performance that she was herself doing in the building of the museum during the process of reconstruction. So you see the building was left for years to be, you know, like this, the glass broken, the walls semi-finished, and so on. So, and you see that, and she was making performance for the empty museum. The performance, which also has to do with the story of museum, that is, has to do with its history and with its institutional determination, that is the Yugoslav collection of the collection of Yugoslav modernist art. And she was casting out the last letter A. You have the title here. In the Venice Biennial Pavilion of Yugoslavia, which in this year, where she was making this performance, was changed the name. So it is carved in the wall of Pavilion Yugoslavia. It's built before World War II and is served to Yugoslav country until the moment of its dissolution. And then the successor was the country of, at the time, Serbia and Montenegro. So it was for the first time that in the museum which carried the title Yugoslavia, another national program have been performed. And so she's casting out the background, the sitting, the bed of this last letter A from the Pavilion of Yugoslavia. And here you have exactly how these letters of Yugoslavia were made, and what are the dimensions, so architectural drawing of the title Yugoslavia on the wall of Pavilion Yugoslavia in Venice, in Giardini. The part about institutions, okay, it was the longest because it is also the introduction of exhibition, and then we will be quicker and shorten some parts so that you also use your attention to see some videos, read text, because there is also a lot of text, and exhibition is made in line with this paradigm of contemporary art as knowledge production, as an investigation, as a knowledge production, and as a remnant of long durée processes. At the beginning of the exhibition for the opening, Milica made a performance, to use her words, sitting on shoulder of Raša Todosijević, big, I mean, in a symbolic sense, by using his Edinburgh statement from 1975, whose title was "Who Makes Profit," whose title still is "Who Makes Profit on Art and who gains from it honestly." And this is the statement which is really interesting because it shows, I mean, almost in a paranoid way, but not in a style of this contemporary paranoia. He uses this as an irony and not as this contemporary irony, but a bit different, to show which agencies are part of the art system, like the cleaning woman, the guys who are printing, the designers, those who prescribe antidepressants to artists, the artist's wife, and so on. Those who sell drinks, and so on. So that through this Edinburgh statement, he really extends what we understand as a system of art into something that's a kind of society on which the very production of art lies onto. And we see how differentiated and how actually big a society it is and how relational the life of artists and the production of art is. So on the basis of this Edinburgh statement, which she reenacted with the elements of reactualization, adding some other contemporary functions that participate in the production of contemporary art over the voice of Raša Todosijević, who was performing his own Edinburgh statement, and this was at the opening. But this chapter of exhibition also extends the question who makes profit on art and who earns from it honestly to the question of common history, emancipatory practices, truth, knowledge, and so on, to knowledge production. So in this reinterpretation, the original title could have been transformed into something like who makes profit from the history, from the historical archive, from re-archiving, representing, repacking, and so on, and who does this politically and responsibly, because contemporary art is full of sitting on shoulders of very important and very dramatic political moments in history, which are there then in contemporary art simplified through the idealized notions of collectivity, solidarity, and so on. And as we know very well, I mean, it is always difficult to say we, but as those who are dealing in their practice with these different political processes, such as liberation struggles, big political emancipatory alliances, the moments of political intervention, and so on, it is clear that it is very far from this idealized and very sweetly sometimes packed and addressed notions, and that actually these processes are very difficult and very bloody and very ambiguous and very heavy, and we have to, as an artist and cultural producers, behave towards such moments of history with the knowledge, with responsibility, with also political responsibility towards the historical moment. So this chapter is also speaking to whom the images of history belong and how artists are stealing these images for the contemporary art production and for rebranding these images by the name of the artist, which can be seen as an act of privatizing of the common historical heritage, of the common historical moment, enclosing it in contemporary art and enclosing it in this, in a way, very proprietary format of artistic authorship, and with this stamp of artistic name as a name of the not only author in a sense of how Bard and Foucault have written about it, but rather in a sense of a value, because quite often in specifically contemporary art, the name of the artist, for me, from my perspective, is can be the name of the factory, because under this name, many people are acting and working and feeling this factory name with the meaning and with the value and with the content. And if we go deeply into this, this is like, first of all, the body of this person who carries this name, so, and who is the artist, and then perhaps curators, writers, organizers, producers, assistants, and so on. And contemporary art is more and more complex in that sense, which is why I think that this chapter of exhibition is very important. The central part of it, actually it starts from this image about stealing the image of history. It is the park of the Museum of History of Yugoslavia, and it is the fragment of the image of the leaders of non-aligned countries. So very important emancipatory political movement that happened in the Cold War times, and that was opposing to both blocks, that is opposing to power politics as such. She is stealing the fragment of one image that's a kind of a representative image of non-aligned, taken at non-aligned summit, first summit in Belgrade in '61, and which presents this like queerish figures of non-aligned movement leaders from the Africa, Middle East, Far East, and whatever we refer today as Global South, including President Tito. And this is just one tiny fragment. You have like a big row of these people standing frontally and being exposed to camera. And then the second video is the video in which Milica's at the time partner and who is a philosopher, psychoanalyst, and artist, and who unfortunately passed away in the meantime, Branimir Stojanović, who speaks about public property. The video is called either public property or barbarism. So for him, this idea of property, actually of private property, I mean, not only from him, for him, but you know, like we can also trace it from the very beginnings of Marxism, from like this famous Engels text, how capitalism in its expansion lies, is sitting on the idea of the family, private property, and the state. Okay, Branimir Stojanović speaks about public property, which was the form of property invented by Yugoslav socialism, so the property that is not belonging to the state, as in other statist socialism, more bureaucratic socialisms, more Stalinistic forms of socialism, which is also today seen as a state capitalism, as a form of state capitalism, capitalism of the state. And we have this other format of property which is private, so that things are yours and you don't share it because this is yours, and you have more than other person next to you, so you are better than this person. So it is like entire complex system of values. What's the central thesis in Branimir's video is that he speaks about the context of anti-Yugoslav wars or post-Yugoslav wars, the wars of the 90s, as the wars in which core is not like nationalism, barbarity, ethnia, ethno conflicts, and so on. So everything that was part of the vocabulary of the either war or critique of war or like official explanatory vocabulary, but that at the core of it is the process of dissolving public property, the process of privatizing. Like, he claims that that the wars were needed here and not in the rest of Eastern Europe, real socialist countries, where the socialism collapsed slowly after 1989, that the war in former Yugoslavia was needed because something violent, something very violent should have taken place to actually make this kind of big historical undoing, big transfer of the public property into private hands. So for him, the destruction of private property and the process of privatization was the main reason of post-Yugoslav wars. And also at the very end, you will find very tiny drawings of one artist from here, which is now also guest at this exhibition. And she is an important artist and very also sensitive artist who worked in a informal sculpture, informal format of sculpture, and who also has some international recognition at her time, but even more today, and her name is Olga Jevrić. She, as a very developed artist of her time, and also which was the time where major sculptures, the group of sculptures to which she obviously belonged by her knowledge and reputation, where they were making, like really producing sometimes great monuments on the sites of partisan anti-fascist struggle in the World War II. So this was the period of mushrooming of such monuments in the space of former Yugoslavia on the sites where usually the most important battles have taken place. And she was against monumentalizing. She spoke about a certain compassion, about certain responsibility of artists who were dealing with such topics, observing this erection of the big monument as also some kind of repetition of brutality in the format of an image, in the format of an artistic decision. And her choice was, and her thesis is that like the monuments to anti-fascism and to suffer of people, to Holocaust, should be in a size of hand. And she made a lot of small monuments in the size of hand, which were maquettes. So she was also, as a woman perhaps, and as such a hardcore attitude artist, she was obviously not really welcome to enter this reconciliatory, like the first row of big, usually male authors who made really wonderful monuments. And okay, we can think of it, but her, whether she's right or not, because these monuments are also dear to us, and many of them are destroyed in post-Yugoslav wars by those who claimed that for the wars are not guilty them, the nationalists, but Tito and his partisans. So Yugoslavia as a multinational community and brotherhood and unity of nations as such. So this is the sequence of narration which speaks about privatization and is presented in the row of images, sometimes moving images, sometimes still images, and we go to Eid. This part of exhibition speaks about this process of a permanent war. Those of you who have been yesterday evening. I don't know if many of you have been yesterday evening to the presentation and the talk with Françoise Verger about violence and about the permanent, the continuous character of war. This is very close, this idea by Françoise Verger is very close to this part of the exhibition, actually. I departed from this claim by Naomi Klein, who speaks about disaster capitalism, explaining the very phrase of disaster capitalism as almost like a unified phrase, because for her, capitalism is nothing else but disaster. And this part, okay, disaster of hunger, of death, of destruction of national resources, so there is nothing positive as a consequence coming back to people as a consequence of capitalism, capitalist installation, and because, of course, the part of it is imperial war, and imperial war, obviously, in most of situations, takes part on other territory where empires are clashing, taking over, and so on. But actually, this is the soil, this is the people who suffer. It is there, and it is normally the product of the struggle over resources, because the capitalism is contemporary capitalism is very extractive, and yesterday I learned, because I didn't know for that when Françoise said that in order that each people in the planet live like people in the West, that we will need 17 planet Earths, because contemporary capitalism and the advantage of some nations is made on extractivism. So good life in the West is the consequence of extractivism somewhere else. So this part of exhibition speaks about such wars. It comprises of two rooms which are interconnected by a narrative, but these are two case studies, and each of them artist is performing repeatedly in different communities, in different sites, in different contexts, and reclaiming or posing some questions to herself and also to these people with communities with whom she collaborates. So this part of exhibition is stemming from, is connected to one news story, which is that at the beginning of the war against terrorism, which was 2001, in the North Afghanistan, where North Alliance intervened, they gathered some people like rebels in the containers, okay, Talibans in the containers, and to transport them to a camp. And then in the midway, they were, from the very beginning, they started complaining how they do not have enough air in this space. And then the soldiers of Northern Alliance shot into the container. And their explanation was that they've done it to open up the holes for the air to get in. Of course, many of the people died in this, like really act of the war crime, no matter how we are speaking about the sides in war and so on. So what seemed very interesting also here in this context is what Milica selected for this info board, this story on war images from Alain Badiou, that he speaks about the images which are used by or propagated by both sides in war, then about the images that are normally used by one side of war, and the images that are used, that are not shown, that are never shown by either side. So this image, the missing image from this article, was one of such images. And Milica started, Milica was very hurted with this image because, of course, there is a lot of similar events taking place in the world, but she obviously felt some specific connection while reading this article, which is also, you know, like brutally put as such in the newspapers without like explanation, without reflection and so on, and which is part of this canon of biased news or objective journalism. So the journalism that's not, you know, like investigative enough, that's not engaged, that's not politically engaged as it was the case like before, but today we are facing this dogma which is part of all big national and international channels that, you know, like the news has to be biased, that we should, you know, like go into the direction of objective journalism and so on. So Milica was obsessed with this image and also with thinking about the impossible representation. Like an example that the vision of this event from the side of the person who is in container. And she started thinking if she is able, or if such image will contribute to the knowledge and about such imperial wars and the war crimes. And then later on she decided to free herself also psychologically, but also to load communities and perhaps herself intellectually and with questions through the process of repeating this scene. Okay, with the empty container, just as a backdrop, using container as a backdrop. So she was performing the same scene of when she would, as an artist, come, being invited perhaps by a biennial, curators and so on. So she will come and she will say, okay, the work that I would like to work on is assumes one container and the group of people that can shoot with real weapons, so, and with the bullets that can go through this heavy material. And then in these processes, different things were opening, such as one of the stories that people who are the owners of the terrain for paintball, or who are the trainers in a paintball, that they are also they were also formerly participating in a military, in different NATO military interventions, like an example, Polish people in Serbia or things like that. And here we have a lot of reconstructions of the same thing in different contexts, in Yerevan, in Russia, in Serbia, in Australia, and many other places, where Milica repeated the same action, and it was each time, now I should cut a bit, it was each time that with just entering this process, she was she was finding out, and the people, the learning community around her, they were finding out that there is a lot of crazy details, and that entire production of such a labor gives you crazy insights in how actually this war is close to us and not very far away. If the previous part was observing contemporary imperial war, maybe the war, you know, like, or permanent war, or the war that still don't have its right name, but is never ending and using different means. This part of exhibition speaks about contemporary camp, and is using an example of the camp of Omarska, which was also one of the cases at Hague Tribunal, the cases of committing war crime and genocide under Muslim citizens in Bosnia by Serbian army. And she's not, you know, like stopping, she's not ending her story and all the groups that participated in this like project, which is an educational project and which is also one of these projects which, through which many people from academics to like observers, experts, artists, young people, citizens, those who experienced the camps, the perpetrators, and so on, participate in. It would be like a long durée debate, research, investigation. The word that Milica Tomić will quite often use, she calls this process, this strategy, that it is anti-commemorative investigation. So she does not want, she is against commemoration in a traditional sense, because it usually means reconciliation as a form of neutralization and covering of all the processes that took place in a certain, on a certain site. So here with the camp of Omarska, it was first the mine, which is built during the times in socialism. Then the mine is used for the camp, for the imprisoning of citizens of around the area of Prijedor in Bosnia, of Muslim identity or origin or ethnicity. And then the place became a set for, it was used after all these crimes have taken place. It was used as a set, as a film set for the ethno spectacle, St. George's slaying the dragon. And after that, capitalism also connected safely to it, so it became a property of ArcelorMittal company, which also participated as a humanitarian, art-loving, sport-loving company, branding Olympic Games in UK. So this very complex process, and we don't have time to go into details, but this very complex process delineates this, what Milica Tomić calls 4 phases of Omarska, so that the concentration camp is not just one place, but it transforms through the history, and this history of transformation is also not to be neglected and should be included in the observation of the crime. So you have a lot of documents, data, text, video here, about site of Omarska. I mean, even landscapes react to crime. In example, they learned in this process of collective investigation that the mass graves can be found from the experts who are finding mass graves, but following vegetation, observing vegetation, because there is a specific vegetation which grows from the site where human bodies are buried. So, and there is a lot of such a detail. So, which is why they are here displaying what they call film machine, and which are documents, images, texts, and so on that can be in the process of observation, in the process of learning, in the process of research, also edited. Because the process of research, according to the thesis of the artist, who was initiator of the project, but it is a collective project that really is more open than, you know, like communities in Belgrade or communities in Bosnia. It includes many other communities in also different countries where they are even, you know, like observing parallels between the migrant camps and such camps as Omarska, because we are living also in times of camps. What's an interesting detail, or perhaps would be more appropriate if I use the word bizarre or scaring detail, is that this maquette is of former mine, Omarska mine, is made by an architect who made the project of architectural project of the site in the times of socialism, and who was then arrested and placed in the camp during post-Yugoslav or anti-Yugoslav wars. And then she was also a witness about the events that took place in the camp during the war, and which are all awful. But what is interesting also here, because these are such difficult topics that if we are speaking about what people have passed through in such situations, this is very difficult and very burdening. So, and very, you know, so the idea is to not only stop on the moment of suffering, but also go beyond and see actually the complicity of us, of history, different historical moments of like international complicity in such events, in events of crime. This part of exhibition is also dealing with the other side of what we understand as violence and as a war. And also, yes, what is also interesting in a context of war, which we can also think of these ideas about eternal peace and war, and the idea of eternal peace and the reason of war and so on. Because this part of exhibition speaks about the war, but about the war in another context, in the context of self-liberation. Because the idea of the eternal peace is being in peace when the injustice is toned down. So like we can live in the eternal peace, but not before we are all liberated. And it was the case with the anti-fascist liberation, with the so-called anti-fascist liberation after the World War II, because I'm on the side of those who think that it was not in all cases anti-fascist victory, but that it was also partly neutralization of fascism and collaboration of capitalist countries with the fascist regime later, and with the achievements, with the economical aspects of the war, and the need of all the liberation struggles in the so-called Third World were really needed. So this part of the exhibition also speaks about journalism, but about this other journalism that's kind of not loved today that much, which is an idea of the militant artist, militant journalist, militant photojournalist, militant photographer, and so on. So those people who are participating in liberation movements, but also using their means, their artistic means, as weapon. So this part of the exhibition is actually about reactivation of the archive of Stevan Labudović, who was an important photojournalist from Yugoslavia. He was also in his youth, he was a young partisan participating in World War II and participating in the department for propaganda. So he was also very much working with this different propaganda, with this also non-hegemonous knowledge, because hegemonous knowledge was fascist, as in the case of Algerian war, the hegemonous knowledge was French colonial regime knowledge, on whose side was technique and the power of representation and the power of distribution, and who used to present the rebels in Algiers as terrorists. So definitely another different picture of war was really needed. And Stevan Labudović, who in his youth experimented with propaganda through also using wall newspapers, which is why this part of the archive and exhibition is shown through in the media of wallpapers as a propaganda. He was sent by Yugoslav Committee for Solidarity for solidarity with the countries in the struggle for independence. He was sent to Algeria before the 60s. He was sent to Algeria in 59 to join the war and to first of all make and produce different reports about the war that will be distributed through the network of the non-aligned movement group in the process of making, because non-aligned were established during the time of Algerian war in 61. But also he, being on the very site, he established a school in which many Algerian both like fighters or those interested in using cameras and photographs were taught how to record, how to edit, and so on. And this was all part of the field struggle, because not the regular studios, but the field where the struggles were taking place became the place where the images were produced, where they were edited, interpreted, and sent out as a format of news. So this is very important figure of the journalist, photojournalist, artist, filmmaker, who is now militant and who is, as it was his case, carrying in one hand his camera, in another hand the machine gun, and using them in alternating them. The story that Milica poses through this exhibit, through this room, is the politics of the images, the ethics of the image, and how this actually, this high ethical image that has to be produced on the site of the struggle in the name of liberation in the name of better tomorrow for the people who are oppressed, how this image should look like, what should be its aesthetic, what should be its politics, how it should be produced, what should be its process of production. These were all questions that Labudović, whose images we see in many of these documentary images from his archive, was posing himself, and he also claimed how, also in line with the critique of the authorship that we passed through in the floor above, he said that he didn't know in the end who produced which image because of also that something that you can read on the plates which are exhibited on the wall there. He was telling, in the midst of reality of liberation war in Algiers, I walk, I sleep and dream of being in Paris in cinema and watching a war about liberation struggles. So for me, this was really important, and I like started developing like a little thesis about thinking of the image through radical breaks of eye opening and closing, dreaming and walking, thinking and projecting. Because these are the images that contain two layers, the layer of evidence, what is seen and what is observed technically, and also the layer of projection, which is why the eyes should be closed in a way. Closed so that we can imagine, so that we can dream, so that we can see more that we normally see by our bare eyes. And, you know, like, which is the vision, the encouraging vision that is very much needed, that was very much needed for these people in struggle, and that is perhaps very much needed for us today, not to stay passive in this how on earth world in which we found ourselves, but also to stimulate our thinking about the reality, our thinking of how to activate in this war that is surrounding us, that is maybe not that immediately siding us, but that is not that immediately around us, but that we see and that we can also support in a way, as Stevan Labudović supported by his small but very important contribution, the Algerian War of Independence. Enjoy.